Targar Negary woke up. She woke up in a box. She did not know where she was, or why it was so dark where she was. All that could be known was that she was in a very small space, surrounded only by dark and by the reverberation of her own screams, all jolting back toward her from the walls and ceiling of her concealment. At her last reckoning she was very ill. In fact, most around her were, and many of those died. It was a time of great calamity and upheaval, of not only wars, of victories and losses, but of great and terrible affliction. Even the wealthiest and most powerful, which is what Talis's father was, were far from exempt from worry, grief, and struggle. No matter the money possessed by the Earl of Greece, a hodgepodge conglomerate station that held a name borrowed from the place in France from which the family was said to have come generations before, an informal name, of course. He could not buy his way out of this. The death that came to so many, including his wife, and now presumably his daughter. Some believed that it must have been the family's strange and distant connection to faraway lands that caused them such horror, perhaps even their having once been vassals of the Holy Roman Empire, and giving service to the throne of England, yet never giving their full allegiance, maintaining innumerable and odd ties to their former home, including the naming of their children in such an odd fashion that no one but those within said family could make pronouncement of the appellations given. In fact, no one knew specifically from where it was that they had come, not even the Earl himself, Targar the Black, Targar Negary, beneficiary of such a grand bestowal of allowance made by earlier kings, all for some ancestor, generations removed, having dedicated himself, and then saving the life of that first king, only to be added to in time, though it was stated by some that the entire matter was staged to begin with, the Negaries positioning themselves in a better land, or at least a land in which they were not hunted. No, Targar Negary did not find herself trapped in a box, assuming herself to have been buried in familial vault because her father's 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 father gave service to some king whose name she could hardly recall, though it had been so eloquently pounded into her head all of her life, staging himself to become one of the most powerful men in all of England, despite having no English or Norman French blood. He did, however, have enough time in service to the Duke of Normandy, right before the man's capture of the English crown, and this was plenty to guarantee lands being granted in France, and for the grandson of this first nobleman connection to the English throne, and with it grants in that land for services rendered. The lack of bloodline, however, was also remedied, the Negaries marrying themselves to enough noble families, some of Anglo blood, some of Norman, tying themselves to those bloodlines through marriage and birth, though they retained the passed-down knowledge of their homeland. Talis did not wake up in this box because her family maintained this knowledge of the original language uttered by their forebears, and placed upon their children names that sounded as if they were mere gibberish to most, or because they were said to practice the black arts that were pure fruition of deviltry, earning reputation and place among only the vile beasts of hell. Talis woke up in a box because her father, stricken with grief and pain, knew not what to do for his young daughter, his favourite child, the one whom he hoped to one day marry to one of the sons of King Edward, possibly Edward the Black Prince, if not even to Edward's much younger brother, John, though the boy was significantly younger than Talis. She was left for dead, assumed to already be so, locked away in an awful place, that place, Talis presumed, where her own dear mother now was tucked away, obviously in a different box. This much Talis knew. She was in this place, far below the upper levels of the family's main castle, where no one would hear her screams. There was no need to make them. However, she knew that she had stopped, but she could still hear many more of the sounds, plus what appeared to her ears to be clawing at lids. Perhaps her mother was not dead either, and had been prematurely put away. Perhaps nearly all of her family that had suffered such a fate had actually been put away before their time. Maybe she could save them all,